Okay, here we are.
Hey,
Welcome, everybody, on this first day of August to the Dev Talk Show. It's August 1st, 2024, if you're watching a recording or maybe just aren't near the calendar, or the days all blend together if you're like me. So, welcome aboard. I'm Chris Gomez, and right across from me, you can see my co host, Rich Ross. How are you doing this morning, Rich?
good, Chris. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. It's gosh, I'm even trying to remember what day it is. It's Thursday here on
Long week.
the eastern side of the United States. So, um, and we're a few minutes after 8 o'clock in this time zone. And so before stand up this morning, we thought we would see if we could get some help from AI, generative AI, to do some things that I thought would be very difficult. Especially to produce a two-man show like this, where the only, I think, assistant producer we have is laying on the floor behind me.
I'd
You
see him back there.
can't really see him right now. So yeah, Rich, what are we going to talk about today?
So this is something I think we talked about a little bit, trying to do because we've been using StreamYard to record all these videos, and we have one of the cool things that we get out of that is we do get transcripts. So we have a collection of files that for all the different shows that we've done, at least for the 50 or so recently that we've done over StreamYard. Because it's easy for us to pull those down. So there's transcripts that we can get. We could also, if we didn't have, the backup or the things from StreamYard, we do have all the videos up on YouTube. We could certainly, there are AI services that will take a transcript, an audio transcript, or an audio file, and turn that into a text document, so you see what happened and what was essentially talked about over the course of the session. And some are even smart enough to know, well, which speaker is talking, and attribute the text to them versus the other speaker, or multiple speakers. So it doesn't just have to be two like we're doing. So those are some of the things when we think about AI, how it might help what we're doing here. And maybe we could use this as a way to help generate the description of the video that we did. Maybe we can use it to actually maybe start putting time codes in there and starting to break this up into chapters. So these are things that we might look at over the course of, we've got an hour today, over the course of the next couple of shows, and see how AI might be able to make the dev show a better experience for our users, as we say.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in this because I think, like a lot of folks watching, I don't know, and be interested to hear your comments. So definitely let us know if you watch on YouTube, whether you're watching live or you watching this after the fact. Is when I see demos on generative AI, most of us, I'm going to make an assumption that most of the people that maybe are watching this show have probably at least tried once ChatGPT.
Yep.
Maybe not, but if you're a developer, we've probably all tried it and even had a little bit of fun with it. But it's just a chat experience. I don't want to say just, because clearly we're not talking about, it's not like the old Eliza where it's very, very basic. It can give some very impressive answers, and and I've even talked on this show about how it could help shortcut my research time into something that, like, I kind of know the answer, but I don't exactly remember it. So let me ask this question, and boom, it takes me right to, like, oh, that's right. That's how I do this thing in .NET or something. But it always seems to be that question and answer experience, like we see on, I think there's a great demo that they show that I've seen used, the demo's out there to use, where there's a fictional camping store.
Yeah.
And they train it on some of the data about those products. And now you can ask it a really cool question, like, so I'm going on this winter camp out, what boots should I buy? And it says, oh, well, these are the boots that'll help you in a cold weather. And that's super useful. But I've always asked myself, is that it? Is there more?
Is that all there is?
Yeah. Is that all? I felt like gosh, I'm trying to think if it was the movie 2010, which is really dating myself when I say that, where they said, "Is that all there is? Is there nothing more?" I don't remember if it was that. I don't think it was 2001 though. So anyways,
Yeah, I don't remember either of those. So, although I saw 2001 recently, so that was it played at our local theater, which was kind of cool.
oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And you know, I have to admit, I've never seen 2001 on a big screen in a movie theater. Even that phrase somewhat dates you nowadays, because there's an entire generation of folks who are not kids anymore who don't see as going to the movies as like super important. You just wait for
Mhm.
it to hit your streaming service. Um, but I could just imagine what it would have been like to see 2001 in a traditional movie house with a huge screen and a big audience, and that must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's, if I'm not mistaken, that actually came out before the moon landing happened. Right?
Right.
So the moon landing was 69. I think that movie came out in late 68 or somewhere in the 68 timeframe. So it's funny, some of the stuff that it almost looks like a plane trip when they're
Hmm.
flying to the moon. You get your tray of food that you get to, and they you know um, attendants who are going back and forth and kind of helping you with those. So it's very bizarre, kind of where they thought we would be another 30 plus years later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, so the movie came out in 1968, apparently, thanks to search here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. Not to get too off track, but I just so happened to be watching a video about Tomorrowland in Disneyland, which was opened. This movie was about Tomorrowland in 1967.
Oh wow. Okay.
uh, and then how it inspired the Walt Disney World version that opened in 71. And Disneyland, when I was a kid, we had an attraction called Mission to Mars, which originally was actually a mission to the moon. But after the moon landing, and I don't think it was like immediately after the moon landing, but shortly after the moon landing, maybe a few years later, they switched it to be a mission to Mars, because going to the moon was no longer fantastic and the future.
Right.
But it was interesting. It's interesting to see the conception of what people thought it would be like. And you're right. There early in 2001, there's the scene where it's almost like a commercial airline flight for
Mhm.
some folks that are flying in space. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out if I was right about that quote, and for whatever reason I haven't found it. But anyways,
Cool. All right. Back to the task at hand. I think what I'm going
oh
to do
gosh,
is,
it's from Star Trek. See,
oh
people are
no,
going to be oh man, I really blew it there, because I am a Star Trek fan. And
sure.
it looks like it was from Star Trek the Motion Picture, the first one.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe it was from Star Trek 5. Maybe it was from Star Trek 5. So anyways,
Good stuff.
oh, we're going to be using when I say, I want to make sure I get terms right.
Mm-hmm.
It is from Star Trek the Motion Picture, and it's about Spock saying it's about Spock talking about V'ger. So folks who have no idea what I'm talking about, now I've answered the question. Anyways, we're going to be using OpenAI and the Azure OpenAI service, which I have tinkered with a little bit, and
Okay.
clearly, and you have too.
Mm-hmm. Good bit of tinkering.
Yeah, I think, is it still the case that if you have an Azure account, you do an extra step? There's an extra step to get added to Azure OpenAI Service Access.
The most, and I had to go through this because my subscription, new year, new subscription, had to get redone, and I did not have to. Now, this could be just because it's I'm a Microsoft employee, so it may not be a thing, but I did not have to I've seen mixed results. I've seen it where people say yes, we still have to, and I've had an occasion or two where I've not. So the
Okay.
worst case is you start the OpenAI service, and it's going to say, "Hey, you can't access this until you go and get your subscription in line and say that you're go through the process of basically getting approved." It's usually a quick process, within a few days. But you need to have that. You potentially might need to have that buffer of time before you start using it.
Okay. Great. Great. I just want to make sure people who are watching, if we'll do what we can, like always, to guide you to where what maybe a URL is or a
Mhm.
place in the documentation, and you can go from there. So
Yep. So
where do we start?
that's a good. Well, I got to start by sharing my screen, so we should do that. Let's see. Oh, present. Share screen. And let's do that one. Sure. I'll probably have to jump out and come back and forth to share a few things because I'm sharing a screen at a time, basically. So in this spot here, we have this is my Azure subscription, and we've got some service that we've created. If you're going to go ahead and create a new, oh,
I that was me. Sorry.
it's all good. So in this here, this is where a collection of all of my OpenAI services. Essentially, that's what you would see. And OpenAI, Azure OpenAI service is essentially the way of running generative AI type of requests. So, and I'm hedging on my words there because it used to initially it was just models that came from OpenAI, the company, the GPT models, and now it's grown to Llama models that come from Meta, Mistral models that come from I'm blanking on where they get, but oftentimes there are models that they get pulled in from other sources, and you have
Oh,
access
okay.
to all of those here. Some are large language models. I couldn't use that term anymore because we now have small language models, which
Oh.
means that they're a little more lightweight. They have different reasons why they are lightweight compared to the larger language. But what those give you potentially is a way of running in a container locally in your environment, right? So OLAM is one of those that lets you do that. Phi3 is another set that lets you do that. And you can basically run it here in a container on your laptop and do the same things that we're doing here, right? So that might be something we can look at as well.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. So in order to get to this page, you're in the Azure portal.
Mm-hmm.
So and many developers I think may be familiar with getting here. And I recall that you do need a resource, an OpenAI resource to get started, and creating that was actually pretty super easy.
Okay.
Just create, and then even if you can't find it, I
Mm-hmm.
found like the search bar, if you just typed Azure OpenAI, it was like boom, it just took you right to being able to create that resource.
Exactly.
Yeah, in fact, you've already got it. So you create this resource, and there really wasn't much. I think, as I looked at it, there wasn't much to the creation. It's like a resource group, the subscription level, but it's not like some other services. Like if you create an Azure web app, there's tab after tab of different options,
Yeah.
which are important, but
Mm-hmm.
it could be overwhelming the first time.
Right.
Here, it
Yeah.
was like you're creating the resource, done, because we're going to be on our way to a different UI in a moment, I
Yep.
think.
The biggest thing is just getting a URL or a name that's unique because it has to sit
Yes.
in the overall namespace of
I think it's
we'll look and see
cognitive
what that
services,
namespace
right?
is. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
blanking, but you get the
Yeah.
idea. So I have here this instance that we created, and you certainly can access it through the portal and go through, all of the various components here. But the best way to interact with OpenAI Studio is to go into OpenAI Studio itself, right? So there's a separate tab that takes you out to OAI .azure, and then whatever your model or your instance of OpenAI is, right? So with that, we have essentially, I'll go back to the homepage. This is how you can kick things off and get things started, right? So if you're just looking to access the playground or do a chat playground or an assistance playground, you can pretty much get started here and go try those things. And we've shown some of this when we did the Hello Dolly app, right? We walked through some of these things, especially when we were trying to figure out the completion side of our interaction with Dolly models. And those videos are up on YouTube as well. I think we did those the end of last year, beginning of this year.
Right.
But for this, we're going to focus on models. And what we have here's a list of all of the models that get rid of that. That essentially are available for us to deploy. And you see we have quite a selection inside of here. I've already gone ahead and deployed this one here, which is the GPT-4o or Omni as people are referencing it, but it is the latest one. It was released at Build, so back in May, and it was actually, if I'm not mistaken, simultaneously released, where I'm hit a bit of an echo. And I'm not sure if that's you or me, because it just started.
Okay. Go ahead.
How's that? It's still, yeah, I still hear it.
Okay, I muted my mic to make sure I didn't have anything to do with it. Let me double check.
Yeah, I don't know if it's coming out over the YouTube bit as doubled up. Chris is looking, he's checking. I'm going to keep talking. And what I'll do is I'll keep describing and just kind of ignore the second voice in my head. So here, I took the liberty this morning of actually going ahead and doing a deployment. So we look at my deployments. I've got one here specifically around GPT-4o, and it's me.
Yeah, so I muted my mic to make sure, and then I tried watching on it, and I'm not hearing an echo on the video right now. So
yeah, it could be me.
Yeah.
We'll keep going. So we have a deployment. And what that gives us is the ability to use that deployment to do any of the things over here in the playground. So we could go to chat, and you can see I've already got it here as a deployment. If I had other models deployed, I could choose the one that I want to essentially have the chat or the conversation with. But here, we're just going to leave this here, and I can, I don't need the tour, thank you.
Yeah.
I can ask it questions, right? And I can say, what do you know about the Dev Talk Show, right? Because that's kind of what we're asking about. Wow.
Oh, huh. Here, can you zoom in just a little bit? Because, or, just increase the browser a little bit, just a little.
There you go.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of these modern UIs detect it, and they don't increase the font size. They're like, oh, yeah, we'll just... So
give you more shape around everything.
Focused on software development, program, and technology trends. Huh, what do you know?
So this is GPT-4o. So it probably has, and we should be able to find out. So if I do Azure Models Catalog, okay. Let's do the one in the docs. So we can go in here and, oh, I'm sorry, that's machine learning. So I go for clicking real quick. In AI Studio, no. I'm probably asking the wrong thing. Let's Azure OpenAI.
So is there a difference when Azure AI and OpenAI?
So yes, make sure we're in the right spot. Okay. So for distinction, we are using Azure OpenAI, which is a service that is in Azure that lets you do generative AI solutions. There is OpenAI, which is the company that created GPT and ChatGPT, and they have an ability for you to sign up and do something similar, talking to their GPT models.
Okay.
So it depends where you want to um, make your requests go, whether it goes over the Azure OpenAI instance or to go out to the OpenAI company service.
Okay. Yeah. And like when you see here Azure OpenAI service models,
Mm-hmm.
this list, um, maybe it's not the same list as the Azure AI model catalog, which might have models from Meta, Mistral.
Yeah.
There's other things listed here. Core 42. I'm new to these terms, but that's not going to be in this particular piece of documentation because these are the ones from OpenAI.
They should be all
Maybe.
once part of the service,
Okay.
and that's something we can show in a minute. But
Okay.
basically, the important bit I was looking for was this one, which is the one that we're using in our uh,
Example today.
thank you.
It's okay.
That copy hasn't kicked in yet. And I don't think it has, while it says this is the version, was 5.13.
Yeah.
We'd have to go out to OpenAI and say, well, what was the latest training set of data that it was given, right? So it probably has some, since we've been doing this for 5 years, it probably has some data in there that might include what we're doing. So
Okay. So to your point, there's a version date on models, but that doesn't necessarily, that's generally like a release date.
yes.
That 5.13.24 does sound like build. So
Mm-hmm.
so there's a release date, but then you might have to go dig a little bit to find out, okay, are they stating that this model was trained on data as of this date or that date?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And it used
All
to
right.
be, oh, here we go.
Oh,
It's
okay. So
this.
there is a chart. I
Yep.
gotcha. Nice.
And I love this feature. Thank you for Alvin for showing me it. So basically in the docs, you
Oh,
can,
look at that. Expand table.
I
That's
know,
nice.
right? So
How
this
long has that
gives
been hiding there?
I, at least a few months, or
Yeah.
more than a few months, because Alvin showed it back when he did the session in May.
Oh, okay. Cool.
That was a session in our local user group. So this gives that information about the model. So it's that's Mini. Omni is the one that we're looking at. So we're looking at this one here, which also is October of 2023. So you can essentially ask it questions up to that date. So events that happened after that, like who won the Super Bowl in the most recent one, which was in February of 24, that wouldn't necessarily be aware of. So we could do that. Let's see.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's exposing. It's basically telling you, hey, here's my last update,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
and then it
Um,
says, sorry, I can't help you.
but there is ways that we can give it information about what might be the latest winner of the Super Bowl, and if we had something where, we pointed to a URL that has that information, we can what's called ground the model in the data so that it understands not just what it was trained with, but this new information that's relevant to the question that I'm asking.
Does that take a while, or if I gave you a link, does it? I just wonder how long that takes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. Um, it should take a little bit because the we don't have the services, and it is going to
Oh,
have
okay.
to. Well,
Okay.
if we're
Yeah.
going this way, it should be using the Bing index for this. Let's see. That's fine. We can use that.
Oh,
Entering
okay. And you need an
index
Azure
unit.
Blob storage resource of some kind that where it's kind of okay.
Yep. So what else does it need? Because it's not that. Oh,
Looks
once
like
it.
an Azure AI search. That must be a different type of resource, I guess.
Yep. Let's see. So Azure AI search. Let's see. And we'll put it over in, because that's where we are. So Azure AI search, what that does is essentially creates something that we need for this, which is the vector index. It's fine. And what that vector index is you think of just asking a keyword about something, like asking about Blazor. You're going to get a bunch of results. But if you say, help me, find information about login for Blazor, that's a bit of a phrase. And those words or collection or breaking down those words into what are called tokens, which is how the generative AI understands things, is a process that AI search can help with. But it can also then take that breakdown of the tokens and drop them into what's called a vector.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we know about 3D vectors. You could probably think of 4D vectors if you throw time in there, but this is like thousands of vectors, millions
Okay.
of, so the idea is that that phrase sits in a space, and documents that have a similar phrase are going to be in that vector space around it, however you envision multidimensional vectors, right? And essentially there's a cosine function, I think it is, and then the cosine function says, well, if those vectors are pointing in this kind of the same direction, then they're probably related content.
Huh. Okay. Do you still have to hit create on this?
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So no, I understand what you're saying. That's so interesting because I have trouble visualizing vectors after like 3 dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
My brain's always been like, and okay. So in any case,
so that resource is there. So if I do a refresh here, I should be able to select. Yep, there we go. Enter name from my index. This is Super Bowl. And I can say next. We'll keep it small. And then we want, so you can have two different kinds of search. Keyword search is like a Bing search, right? So it's just going to based on the words that you're putting in the searching. Semantic search is gives us basically that understanding of how words relate to each other.
Okay.
And that a word in my phrase that has words in the documents that are closer to each other is going to have more meaning than if they're further apart. So let's do that. Data connection. That's fine. Tell you what, why don't you hide my screen for a sec?
Okay.
Just in case.
Alrighty.
Save and close. All that seemed to work. Ingestion is in process, so you can come back to me if you want.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this dovetails a little bit into what we're going to do. I don't know if we need all these services, but
Right.
you were talking about how we have transcripts of some shows because StreamYard creates them for us, which is really nice. And so the idea here is that oftentimes when we do a show,
Right.
sometimes our shows might, if you were able to look at the entire channel, the entire YouTube channel, and say, okay, so it looks like they took them an episode or 2 or 3 to do a thing. Then it can become a little difficult sometimes to go back and look at like an hour-long show and wonder, okay, so number 1, what was accomplished on this show? And number 2, when did it happen? Instead of do I have to watch the whole thing to figure out the 10 minutes that maybe is the part that I'm looking for? And so transcripts can help us do this, which I think really surprised me. I never expected. I just didn't think of that's the whole point of this, is that I just don't feel like my mind is opened enough to more than just question and answer applications.
Right. Yeah, and that's I think as you start to see these different examples of using these generative AI models and different patterns around that, then that can kind of open up some of the possibilities for just the stuff we're doing as application developers in our line of business applications or our consumer applications. What I'm going to try here now, this over here, it looks like it's published, right?
Okay.
So it has realized that there is some deeper conversation around what AI search and vector databases give you, but essentially it has chunked out the information that was in that article and created a bunch of vectors against that. So now we should be able to ask,
and we'll find out. This is totally live.
yes, right. So here we go.
Right. It knows it was.
Yep, was run by the Kansas City chief, and you can see the reference, which is really cool because it's not just the fact that, hey, I've got an answer for you, but here's what I'm basing my answer on. And we could click.
So what's interesting is it's calling the most recent Super Bowl. I guess that's 57. And it's correct about the Kansas City Chiefs winning, but the Kansas City Chiefs have now won back-to-back. So the last one was actually 58.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's and they have it as winning 57 and 58.
Right.
But they didn't come back with 58 here.
Yep. Now so it could be that when it read that content, it picked out the first Super Bowl shown there in parentheses. So.
It could. The other thing is that if you think about the training data, the last Super Bowl it knows about or was trained with is 57 because that was in February of 23.
Right.
Okay.
The article does have it. It's just that
yeah, totally. You can see that here.
Right.
Because that's the citation we pointed to.
Yep.
But we didn't really give it any additional information. So think here, you have an AI assistant that helps find people information. This is called the system prompt. And this is the thing that starts to set the context with which the generative AI responds.
Oh, okay.
So we could say you're an AI assistant that helps right, and just be very specific. You answer questions related to this.
Okay.
And then we can get even more specific.
You're an AI assistant that helps answer questions related to the Super Bowl. Only respond with information provided in the prompt. If you are asked questions outside of the Super Bowl, respond. Oh, I see. So you're kind of telling it don't.
Right? So we could do that.
Respond something else. Yeah.
Yes. So what this does is this further helps set the context for the response. So we're kind of doing a lightweight version of what's called the RAG pattern, or retrieve, augment, generation. So we're retrieving information, and that Wikipedia article you sent is the information, right? We're going to augment that and kind of curate that and then generate a response. So the system message is a key part of that, because that's the first thing essentially that the generative AI sees. And then all the rest of the context after that is now framed based off of what's in that part of the message. So
Okay.
now if we ask, and let's clear the chat so we don't have any background, I've got to apply the changes because we're setting the context again. And then I can say, see, that still has that, which is concerning. And this is part of the iterative process of getting that prompt to really provide an accurate response.
Yeah. Now we gave it
times.
one URL, so it read this one article, right?
Yep, exactly.
And let me see, that article does have a table in it, and I'm just going to double check. I wonder, I mean, there could be a bug in the article, but it doesn't look like there is. Not that I can see. There is a table at the end that shows all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, it's I mean, it is figuring out the consecutive wins.
Yep.
Okay. I just thought it was interesting that I could grab an article and try to augment that immediately. I didn't. That was definitely on the spot.
Yeah.
Because we have like transcripts ready for the show that I unfortunately I think I got us a little distracted, which I'm not trying to walk away from this, just that we definitely had a plan to look at the show transcripts. So
yeah, and
I don't want to miss out on that.
No, but this is good. This helps
Yeah.
people think about things and something they might be aware of, sporting events, things of that nature. So if we go back to here and we're looking at our, again, same deployment, different data. So we don't have any data that we're adding to kind of ground our model with. And we'll keep this prompt the same. What we can do is essentially take, and give me a second to pull this up. And it's off screen. I know you guys can't see it, but it's really just essentially a huge, whoops.
It's just like a text file that's literally just transcribed to the best of its ability what we said on this show.
Yep.
And I spotted there in the text that this show was July 12th. Talking about custom user store and authentication. Right. This is when we were we're working on implementing a custom user store so that we can use the ASP.NET sign-in manager and not have to do so much of this ourselves. And it's a little eerie to be reading this thinking like, oh gosh, this really is kind of how I talk in these broken half sentences. And there just seems to be so little useful information in here. I just don't. I really was looking at this and just saying like, what is it going to do? So this is our chat prompt, and you, in other cases, you usually ask a question, but here, all that's going to be in this text box is the transcript, right?
Yes.
So now the system message is what's going to define what to do with it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So I want to use the Omni model because it takes, as we saw from the, is it this one here? You can input 128,000 tokens. Okay, great. What does that mean? Well, the tokens are essentially 3/4 of a word as a rough estimate. We could take, let me see. I believe token counter. So OpenAI has a tokenizer and a counter. I think do this. Yep. So I can enter some text. In this case, we're going to use that. And you can see it is 12,600 characters. I'm sorry, tokens with 53,000 characters.
Okay.
And you can see how it's breaking it up. The colorization is, as it changes color, is a different token. So sometimes it's a whole word, sometimes it's part of a word, depending on the size of the word. So token IDs. There we go. So you can actually see the IDs of the tokens. You can see the text. So this is a way to kind of visualize what's going on as it's getting passed to the generative AI model.
Okay.
And then here, we're going to basically change, as you mentioned, the system prompt. And we're doing it this way. This is more of a manual way of doing it.
Right.
Ideally, we're not going to have a conversation with the model. We're basically saying we basically want to prime the model with the system prompt, but then essentially just pass it that string of text and let it do its thing. Ideally, this will be like in some kind of a console app or something that sits and runs behind the scenes. But right now, we're just kind of showing how this works.
Right. Right.
So if we go here, so you're an AI
So
assistant. Go ahead.
as you're typing this, all of what you're saying is that everything we're doing here in the Azure OpenAI portal, the Azure OpenAI Studio, in this playground, this is all accessible through SDKs, APIs. You can write your own apps that do these, that basically supply these inputs and would receive the outputs. It's just that sometimes it's really nice to have these tools so that as a developer kind of thinking through what's possible, you don't have to write the thing just to see what's possible with the your OpenAI resources.
Yes, exactly.
So the system message, as he's typing here, you're an AI assistant that takes a transcript from the show, The Dev Talk Show. The show focus on developer topics. Provide a 3 to 5 sentence summary of the transcript. Okay. Create a meaningful show title based on this content. Oh, I like how the prompt here, only, this is the stuff I would never think of. Only use this text to formulate your responses.
Okay. So let's see what that does. So it should take a few seconds. Oh, sorry. Hang on. Apply changes, which we didn't do. So that should ground the model.
Okay.
Clear the chat. We'll drop that in there. And then.
So instead of like other times when I've used something based on generative AI, I'm not that you necessarily have to, it's not Jeopardy. You don't have to put your chat in the form of a question. But here we've instructed it in some way that you're not really going to get a question. You're going to get a transcript of the show. That's what the input is.
Yes.
And here we get a show title of Deep Dive into Custom User Store and Authentication in Blazor.
So just to be fair, this is the one that we did, implementing custom user store in Blazor.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And so in this episode of the Dev Talk Show, Chris and Rich continue their exploration of implementing a custom user store and authentication within a Blazor app. They delve into the challenges and intricacies of using the sign-in manager and use-in manager, including handling user passwords and the importance of proper setup in Visual Studio. The discussion also touches upon the need for a user registration process to complement the authentication setup. Throughout, the hosts emphasize the importance of understanding the underlying mechanics to make informed decisions in real-world applications. That's really interesting. I think so. Some of it is a little generic, but it's also very specific when it talks about the sign-in manager and user manager.
Right. Which
those are the names of the classes. Yeah, the objects that you use out of the ASP.NET library, basically.
Yes. Even without the spacing, right? So if you think of the text that might have come out of that transcript, I'm sure we could search for sign in manager or something related to that. But to understand that in a framework context, this is really how it should be. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is like when you read the transcript and you see a lot of the use of the word like and yeah and then all the small talk, it seems to have gotten past that.
Yeah.
And I think just probably this is the whole concept of prompt engineering, which never this really helps it hit home, because prompt engineering is getting this prompt. I see these people who do demos with this stuff, and they'll put a prompt in, and the prompt is miles long, and I think like, oh wow, there's a lot more to this than just, hey, who won the Super Bowl.
Right.
It's and so I guess by fine tuning the prompt, you can get more and more towards what answer you're looking for.
Yes. Which is,
and so the practical application for us is that we come back to thinking about a show and saying, well, how do we summarize this? What should the title have been? And boy, wouldn't it be nice if there were chapters in YouTube, but gosh, that sounds impossible. So
kind of,
yeah.
But what if we did something along the lines of create I could spell.
Create appropriate chapter sections for the video. Okay.
So let's see what that gives us, right?
Yeah. Just
let's
adding one more sentence there and applying the changes.
Yeah. So we've applied the changes. I'm also going to clear the chat because we don't want it to have any history of what it was it said before. So this is basically just like we're coming at it fresh and asking to do this.
Oh, wow. That's totally different.
And I don't know where the timings come from.
Yeah.
Because those are probably, just rough estimates, but.
Yeah, I agree with you there, that just from the text, you kind of wonder, how could it know unless it maybe divided it up proportionally?
Yeah, which is what it looks like by 5-minute increments.
But it gave it a shot based on what you asked it to do.
Yep.
And so it still talks about, so now the summary changed a little bit, but still it is saying, explore the intricacies of using the sign-in manager, handling user logins without using the default templates. Wow, that's a real key point.
Yeah.
Is it's all about Blazor authentication from scratch, right? And then so we had some setup, and then we looked over custom user stores. We implemented the sign-in manager. Did we handle password hashing? Well,
we talked about it.
That's true. We probably talked about it. And then what else would we do next? So, yeah. And then that part at the end where the authentication schemes were coming back and creating separate cookies,
Yes.
one for what was in the default, and then trying to get it to use our cookie. So,
pretty cool, right?
Well, the thing about it is I never would have imagined that it was possible for this kind of, I don't even know what to call this whole process to take something so specialized, a conversation between two people, and then also something with so much so vague. Because a lot of times what happens in our conversations is the exciting stuff might be on the screen, and then we talk about it. And so there's a lot of broken sentences, and a lot of yeah, and oh, and hey, and let me try that. And to filter through all of that and get closer to, with some fine tuning here, we probably really do have a way to create a system where given some inputs, transcript being one of them, there's probably more inputs to come, right?
Yep.
That it really could say, okay, here's how you should chapter it. Here's a good summary. And for something like us, where I have tried, some folks may have noticed, if you've gotten lucky, 1 or 2 videos where I have tried to go back and chapter things. And it's a fair amount of work, because you essentially watch the whole video again, and you're trying to decide as you're watching it, well, maybe here's a good place to start. Here's a good place to start. What was the timestamp again?
Right.
It's what you hire people for to do on YouTube, right?
Exactly.
So
one of the things we can do is create appropriate capture sections for the video, provide the let's do this, because I like the one sentence thing it has there. the section.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Section. Provide. What am I looking for? Oh, the. Let me.
Oh, I
Let me
see.
do this.
Provide the.
5.
Yeah, gotcha. So, like you're saying, you're telling it to continue doing the one sentence description and then provide the 5-word phrase that starts the section. Oh, okay, the exact language that we used.
Yeah, because then we should be able to then search and find where that is in the transcript, right?
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
So let's clear the chat. Let's do the changes. And let's pop this in there again.
Okay. And you know what's a little disconcerting about this, I think, and I don't know if this is because having been doing software development like your whole life, is that it's hard to get over the fact that when you run this each time, it's not the same exact answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that non-determinism makes you feel like, well, which one do I keep? Which one do I keep? And I suppose the trick is really the prompt engineering to get you an
Yes.
answer that's satisfactory every time, even if they're slightly different. You go, but that's essentially the answer I'm looking for.
Yeah. And don't underestimate that part, because I've been helping customers through this process. And we do the RAG pattern, we get the data coming back, and yeah, the data sources look right. And it's focusing on the sections in there where it kind of looks like it's getting the right thing. Modifying that system message helps really hone in the generative AI component so that we get something that's repeatable, which is the challenging part.
So I love how it said in part 3, implementing the sign-in manager, transitioning from bare metal ASP.NET Core to using sign-in manager. That's pretty cool. And then you could go find that section, which starts off with a totally different phrase, right?
Right.
It's got, the phrase has nothing to do with it, but it's still figured out from here on, they're going to do this thing.
Yep.
So
It's how are you seems like it was an early part of the conversation,
yeah,
and
a
they're
little bit.
not word for word things either. So I think the one down here that said like I do remember in earlier days, it actually is the full sentence is, and it wasn't what I thought, because I do remember in earlier days of Razor, right? So it was a little concatenation of the words, but it had all the
Oh, okay.
words. So it's kind of interesting.
Okay. So let's say, now what's interesting about this, it's providing us an answer. It's providing us an answer that this is something you could cut and paste and put it right into a document.
Yeah.
We've done this before because you did it in the Hello Dolly example.
Mm-hmm.
Is you've told it, okay, format your answer as a JSON object with these characteristics.
Yeah.
So theoretically, you can get it to do a little bit more of your homework and say, okay, we know that the YouTube API would take this information in a certain way. So if we teach it how to format it in that way, it can even provide what's essentially going to be the request to YouTube to go update the video.
Yes.
And so just because we're looking at it this way, we should automatically imagine like the transformation step is somewhat, that's just more work, more prompt, more work there. Oh, you hit mute on accident, I think. Yeah, you got on StreamYard, you got muted. Sorry. Oh, it says your mic's not connected. That's why. Yeah, for some reason it thinks your mic isn't connected. At least that's what it's telling me. Can't unmute. Their mic isn't connected. So that's weird that would happen there. But yeah, so like we're, just to just to kind of look at it, we're looking at prose, but it could just as easily have been, we could instruct it to provide like output that we need for our next step. There is another step to this, which I was hoping we could look at. I mean, it is 9, and then for some reason your mic is I've had this happen to me where sometimes, because it's browser based, I've had to restart my browser connection. So if we see Rich disappear for a little bit, we'll know why. But I feel like the next step here is that there was another transcript, which I think Rich may have on hand. It was generated from the audio. And so this is using a text transcript to transform it into a we're transforming this into usable output, either just to read or to paste into YouTube. But there was another step that you had done where you also took the audio, and we have timestamps for the words in the audio.
Yes. So that is something that we'll have to show, because when I recreated everything, I kind of lost that one.
Okay.
But the idea is there's another service. And I think what I was trying to say when you were talking about, the breaking this up and send this off to YouTube, we might not do, let's see if I can get back over here. What was given from talking to GPT-4o with all of that text and everything else, that's great. So maybe we just take this and feed that into maybe another model.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a 4 Omni model. Maybe we could give it to a lighter weight one and have less cost around it, and then have it just focus on, here's all the content. Just basically put it in this format for us.
Okay. And then the next step, I think, is to say, okay, well, that's great, but then how do you chapter it? And because you are heading towards this output, not just giving us really nice summaries, but even pointing towards, look, here is the place in the transcript that this chapter starts at, then it should be able, or we should be able to link that up with a version of the transcript that has timestamps in it. And so, okay, so I found that phrase and it's at 5 minutes and 16 seconds. So that will be the start of the chapter in the video.
Exactly. So there are other services in Azure that do AI. We used to call, you may have heard of things like cognitive services.
Yeah.
This is a different bundling of all of those, because they've expanded some of those services. So there are things related to speech, where you're able to basically take speech to text. And that's what we're doing. That's what I set up previously. So it was a speech to text model that would take an audio file, and from that audio file, because it's got not just a raw dump of text like the previous example, but it actually is running through all of that audio over time, and is able to have timestamps around when things are said. So basically grouping it up by phrases and say, during this time frame, this was the phrase that was said, and which speaker said it. So it basically breaks that content down into those kind of parameters. So, and I think we did this previously when we were kind of playing around with it, but take that information and then take those phrases that start the chapter that generative AI gave us, and could find them back in that transcript broken up by timestamps. And then now we have the information that we can include in the description to say, well, this is where the timestamp URL should be, basically.
Right. No, that is great. That is great. I mean,
cool stuff.
I know we just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But I really get impressed when in the text it uses the interface names like straight out of the ASP.NET platform. And I imagine with some fine tuning of the prompt, you can get it to do that every time, because it seems to make choices like, well, this time I'll call it the sign-in manager, and it even puts a hyphen there, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But probably by engineering the prompt a little bit, you can say, you can get it to lean towards using the language specifics. And I'm not sure that I'm 100% right about this. I only think of that so that now I'm somebody watching the video. I look at the prompt. I have something I could immediately drop in and search for, and say, oh, wow, I've never heard of sign-in manager before. Let me go search. And you just type that in exactly as it is. And boom, there you are in ASP.NET
Right.
documentation. But so I'm really excited because the end goal here is not just to like we're starting in these tools because it helps us understand where we can go. Now, the next steps, besides kind of wrapping up and using the tooling to figure this out is great,
Mhm.
but then is saying like, okay, now how do we build a service or of our own
Right.
that we can drop whatever inputs it is, whether it's a transcript, the different versions of the transcript, and get out something that we can meaningfully update videos with and help people out when they're looking for something in the show.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, you know, and now going back to chatbots, which I sort of like at the beginning kind of said like, now you're heading towards a place where the videos are chaptered well, they're easy to look through, but then now you really can have a question and answer of, so I want to learn more about this topic, what shows covered it, and it might even be able to point, you know, I don't know, depending on how much work you put into it,
Mhm.
could even point directly to spots. It
Yeah.
sounds interesting, and it's the kind of thing I would never imagine was possible without having just somebody go in and dive in and watch the shows and take a lot of notes. And
All the stuff that, yeah, you would have a producer doing if they were kind of sitting alongside and saying, "Okay,
yeah,
this is the chapter, this is the chapter, this is the chapter,"
yeah,
right?
right.
So, yeah, this is, there's I think you're right. I think there's a couple other shows that we might wanna do around this and kind of see what we can build from files landing, things happening, and then writing that back to the APIs, which we've done a little bit of on the YouTube side, which I think should be um, pretty interesting to kind of walk through what that looks like. If that's of interest to folks, let us know.
Yeah. All right. So um, we're a couple minutes after 9. I know
Yeah,
morning stand-up's coming up pretty soon. So this was great, Rich. Thank you so much for showing it to us. And we had a couple
absolutely.
people join us in chat today. Thank you for being here with us. And today broadcast on YouTube and Twitch and my personal LinkedIn page. Um, I noticed today, starting today, that I could not live broadcast to Twitter anymore. So that was kind of a bummer. I think, you know, whoever happens to be following us on Twitter, I think seeing that video there might be a way to get them to say, oh my gosh, they're on right now. But that's okay.
Yeah,
Even if you follow us on Twitter at the Dev Talk Show, the link to this YouTube video would have been there. But if you're watching it in the future, you already found us on YouTube. So definitely, if you love what we're doing here, you know, like the video, hit the subscribe button, and most importantly, leave comments with your questions. Or, you know, if you have some experience with some of these things, we learn from you as well. So anything, if you have some advice, tips, or examples, if you can point us at examples, we would definitely highlight them. So
yeah,
um, definitely appreciate it.
cool.
All right.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. That was great. I'm always impressed by this about how putting in that big block of text turns into something much more useful, because I just see myself rambling in the transcripts, and yet the model seems to figure it out. So, in any case, for Rich, I am Chris Gomez, and we will see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show. Oops.